All right, so today we're diving deep into some pretty choppy international waters. French President Macron just gave this televised address and like everyone's talking about it.
Yeah, it's really fascinating, isn't it? How
Yeah.
like just one statement from someone like him can just totally like reverberate across the world and get all these discussions going, not just in France but globally.
It really is. And what makes this deep dive so interesting is the unique blend of sources that we have for this one.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so we're going to be analyzing a short clip from Macron's speech that's been making the rounds on TikTok.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and alongside a selection of user comments.
Oh cool.
So we're kind of getting like both Macron's like official message, but also like the unfiltered reactions of just like everyday people.
Yeah, that's a powerful combination.
Exactly, and it lets us see how like this message is being interpreted,
Yeah.
by all these different audiences. So first, let's hear what Macron actually said. This is the snippet from his speech that's causing all the stir. Quote from TikTok video. I want to believe that the United States will stay at our side, but we have to be ready if it doesn't.
There's a lot to unpack in that
Yeah.
statement to like really grasp its weight. I think it's important to consider like the current global dynamics.
Yeah.
We're witnessing a huge shift in the global landscape.
Mm-hmm.
And that's putting a strain on a lot of these longstanding alliances, including the relationship between the U.S. and France.
Yeah, for sure. And let's jump into those TikTok comments then, because there's a lot to say about how people are reacting to all of this. It seems like a lot of users are sharing Macron's concerns. They're expressing this like lack of confidence in American leadership, to put it mildly.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And those sentiments are definitely coming through loud and clear in the comments.
Yeah.
I saw one commenter who went so far as to say, TikTok comment America, what have you done? In less than a month, you've destroyed 80 years of partnership.
Oh, that's a huge statement.
Right.
And it kind of points to this sense of like betrayal and disillusionment that a lot of people are feeling.
Yeah.
Another commenter said, TikTok comment, America is in bed with the enemy.
Wow.
It's clear that there's this really like profound shift in perception happening right now.
Absolutely. We're seeing this whole range of reactions from like fear and anger to surprisingly a good amount of hope too.
Yeah, I was going to say there's definitely this sense of if the U.S. isn't going to be there, Europe needs to figure this out on its own, running through a lot of these comments.
Yeah.
For instance, someone wrote, TikTok comment, go Europe, time to stick together.
Yeah, that really speaks to a rising sentiment of European self-reliance.
Yeah.
If the U.S. like retreats from its traditional global role,
Yeah.
I think some people see this as Europe's chance to kind of step up and forge their own path.
It's almost as if we're watching this power vacuum emerge in real time,
Yeah.
And all these different forces are trying to fill it.
Right.
But, not everyone agrees that a united Europe is like the answer to this.
Right.
We're also seeing a lot of internal divisions within France itself reflected in the comments.
Yeah, it's important to remember that this goes beyond like just global politics. This intersects with domestic politics as well.
Definitely. And there are plenty of comments that are targeting Macron directly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Calling him a puppet and just questioning his leadership in general.
Huh. How do we interpret this internal dissent then? Is it just like standard anti-establishment sentiment, or is there something more to it?
It's likely a blend of factors. I think there's definitely a degree of dissatisfaction with Macron and his policies that predates this whole thing. But these global uncertainties are undoubtedly amplifying those existing tensions.
It's like adding fuel to a fire that was already smoldering,
Yeah.
When people feel anxious and insecure, they tend to lash out at those in power.
Right.
And in this case, that's Macron. But, some of these comments go beyond criticism.
Yeah.
And they're venturing into like full-on conspiracy theories.
Oh, wow. So conspiracy theories, they often take root during times of like crisis and uncertainty. Right.
When people feel this loss of control, they often seek out like these simplistic explanations, even if those explanations are totally based on misinformation.
Right. It's that classic someone must be pulling the strings narrative.
Exactly.
And social media can just be a breeding ground for these kinds of narratives.
That's true. And it really highlights the importance of critical thinking, especially in an environment like social media.
Yeah.
We need to be evaluating sources, assessing evidence, and distinguishing between fact and fiction.
So we have Macron's warning, this whole spectrum of public reactions, and this broader context of global instability.
Yeah.
Where do we go from here?
That's the question, isn't it? What happens if the U.S. does step back from its traditional role on the world stage? What does that mean for the future of Europe and more specifically France? What alternative partnerships or alliances might we see emerge? Those are the key questions we need to be asking as we navigate this increasingly complex world.
And to understand those questions better, I think we need to look back in time for some historical context.
To really understand how France might respond to this potential shift in the U.S. presence, I think it's helpful to look back at their history.
Okay.
France has this long tradition of, pursuing strategic autonomy even while maintaining alliances.
Right. They've never been afraid to forge their own path, even if it ruffled a few feathers along the way. Are there any specific historical examples that shed light on this?
Definitely. I think a really good example is de Gaulle's decision to withdraw from NATO's military command back in 1966.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, this move was super controversial at the time, but it really underscores France's commitment to maintaining its independence on the world stage.
So this isn't a new concept for France, this desire to chart its own course.
No, not at all.
But how might that translate into concrete actions in the current geopolitical climate?
One possibility is that France will take on a much more assertive role in shaping European defense policy.
Okay.
We might see them pushing for greater military integration within the EU and advocating for, increased defense capabilities independent of the U.S.
So less reliance on the U.S. security umbrella and more focus on building up their own defenses.
Exactly.
What might that look like practically?
It could take a lot of different forms.
Yeah.
We might see increased defense spending across the EU, more joint military exercises, and possibly even the development of independent European military technologies.
Wow.
But it wouldn't necessarily mean a complete break from NATO or the U.S.
Right, it sounds more like a recalibration, a shift in the balance of power.
Exactly. France could aim to maintain its security ties with the U.S. while simultaneously bolstering European defense structures. It's a way of kind of diversifying their options and ensuring their security in a world that's constantly changing.
And we can't forget about the economic aspect of this.
Oh, right.
We touched on those trade tensions and disagreements earlier.
Yeah.
If the U.S. adopts a more protectionist stance, how might that affect France, which relies so heavily on global trade?
That's a crucial point. If the U.S. becomes less engaged in the global economy, it could definitely push France to strengthen economic ties with other partners.
So thinking beyond traditional alliances and looking for opportunities elsewhere,
Yeah.
where might they turn?
Well, we might see France deepening its trade relationships with countries in Asia, particularly China.
Okay.
Or they might seek closer economic cooperation with other European powers, further strengthening that EU economic bloc.
So it seems like France has a few different avenues to explore, both in terms of defense and economic partnerships.
Yeah.
But what about the softer side of power? France has always been this global cultural force. Could that play a role in their strategy?
Absolutely. France has this really powerful global presence through its art, fashion, literature, and cuisine.
Mm-hmm.
And this soft power could become even more crucial in a world where traditional power dynamics are in flux.
It's not just about military might or economic clout. It's about the influence of ideas and culture.
Precisely. France could leverage its cultural influence to build bridges, foster dialogue, and promote its values globally.
And of course, we can't overlook the importance of diplomacy. France has this long history of diplomatic engagement and mediation, right?
Oh, yeah, they're known for their skilled diplomats and their ability to kind of navigate these complex international negotiations.
Mm-hmm.
This diplomatic expertise could be vital in a world that's, increasingly in need of multilateralism and cooperation.
Yeah.
We might see France taking a leading role in mediating conflicts, building consensus, and crafting new international agreements.
It's like they could become this bridge builder in a world that feels increasingly fractured and polarized. But realistically, even with all these potential strategies, France faces some pretty serious hurdles.
Well, for sure.
What are some of the biggest challenges they'll need to overcome?
Well, resources are a major factor. Increased defense spending, diplomatic initiatives, economic diversification.
Right.
All of these strategies require significant financial and human capital.
It takes more than just good intentions to reshape a world order.
Exactly. And then there's the challenge of domestic politics. We already talked about those internal divisions within France.
Mm-hmm.
Macron faces opposition from both the left and the right. So any kind of major policy shift is going to require careful negotiation and compromise.
Navigating those political waters can be pretty tricky.
Indeed. And then ultimately there's the question of leadership.
Okay.
Does France have the vision, the will, and the ability to actually step up and play a leading role on the world stage? Can can they rally others to their cause?
Those are the big questions, and only time will tell how France chooses to navigate this new geopolitical landscape.
Yeah.
It's a fascinating situation with these high stakes and potentially far-reaching consequences. We've been focusing a lot on France, but what does this potential step back from the U.S. really mean for the rest of Europe?
Well, it could create this like really significant power vacuum that Europe would need to fill. And this could be like a huge opportunity for greater European integration, you know?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, for a more unified and assertive European Union on the world stage.
Oh,
Think of it as Europe like stepping out of the shadows and becoming a major global force in its own right.
that sounds like a pretty big opportunity for Europe to take control of its destiny.
It definitely could be,
Hmm.
but it's not without its risks. You know, this kind of shift could also lead to more like fragmentation and division
Right.
as individual nations start to prioritize their own interests and agendas over collective action.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really like a fork in the road for Europe.
Okay.
One path leads to like greater unity and influence,
Yeah.
while the other could lead to like disarray and weakness.
And the choices made by those individual nations like France will have a huge impact on which path Europe takes.
Exactly. They're at a crossroads. We've seen how the U.S. and Europe are already kind of at odds over certain trade deals,
Hmm.
like the one where the U.S. imposed tariffs on those steel and aluminum imports,
Right.
which directly impacted a lot of French businesses.
Yeah.
There are also disagreements over those digital services taxes that some European countries, including France, have implemented on those large tech companies, many of which are American.
Those specific examples really highlight the complexities of this whole situation. It's not just about like these abstract ideas of alliances and autonomy.
Right.
It's about real-world economic impacts.
That's exactly right. These disagreements have tangible consequences for people and businesses on both sides of the Atlantic,
Hmm.
and these tensions just underscore the need for France and Europe to think really strategically about their economic future.
This whole deep dive has been a whirlwind. We've covered so much ground, from Macron's warning to those TikTok comments, from historical context to potential scenarios for the future.
Yeah, it has. It's been a fascinating exploration of this really complex and constantly evolving situation, and it's definitely one that demands our attention.
So what's the key takeaway for our listeners then? What should they keep in mind as they're processing all of this information?
The key takeaway, I think, is this. We're living in a time of immense uncertainty and change. The old rules of the game are being rewritten, and the future is far from certain.
Right.
But this also presents us with this really unique opportunity to shape that future.
So it's not just about observing these changes, it's about actively engaging with them.
Absolutely. We have the power to create a world that is more just peaceful and sustainable.
Mm-hmm.
But it requires us to stay informed, think critically, and use our voices and actions to make a difference.
That's a powerful message to end on. It's not about passively accepting the future. It's about actively creating the future we want.
Well said. The future isn't something that just happens to us. It's something we build together.
Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the complexities of international relations and the potential paths forward for France and Europe. It's been a very insightful journey. Until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and keep engaging with the world around you.